Hello. I always thought betrayal would come with a dramatic revelation, texts discovered by accident, whispers behind closed doors, a guilty expression at the wrong moment. But when I found out my wife had been unfaithful, it wasn't a heated confrontation or some grand cinematic twist. It was a Tuesday. Just an ordinary, forgettable Tuesday. The absurdity of it still amuses me. It happened like this. I got home earlier than usual. I had a meeting that got canceled, and instead of wasting time at the office, I decided to surprise my wife with dinner. I stopped by her favorite sushi place, picked up a bottle of white wine, and walked into the house like any devoted husband would. I wasn't expecting romance. I wasn't expecting gratitude. I wasn't even expecting her to be home, honestly. But what I found was something different. Something worse. Her perfume lingered in the air, strong, fresh. A little too strong for someone who was just lounging at home. There was music playing, soft but unfamiliar. The kind of playlist you make for someone when you're trying to set a mood. Then, the detail that changed everything. An empty wine glass on the counter. Just one. I was still holding the bag of sushi, still standing there like an idiot, when I noticed it. A single, unmistakable detail that clicked everything into place, the slightest indentation on the couch cushion. The kind that only happens when someone has been sitting there for a while. Someone had been here. Recently. That's when I felt it. Not rage, not despair, but something colder. Something sharper. Clarity. I didn't need to check her phone. I didn't need to storm upstairs and demand an explanation. In that moment, I knew. And once a man knows, there's no going back. So I did what any rational man in my position would do. I smiled. I walked over to the couch, pressed my fingers into the cushion where her mystery guest had been, and chuckled to myself. Pathetic. The old me, the one who loved her without question, the one who would have been heartbroken, was gone. Replaced by someone new. Someone calculating. Someone who had no intention of reacting like a fool. No shouting. No tears. No begging for answers I already knew. Instead, I set the sushi down, uncorked the wine, and poured myself a glass. I sat in the same spot where he had been, leaned back, and took a slow, deliberate sip. She thought she was playing a game. She had no idea she was about to lose. When she finally walked in, she looked normal, completely unaware that the rules had changed. She smiled at me, that same practiced smile she had perfected over the years. The one that had once made me feel lucky. Now, it made me feel nothing. "You're home early," she said, casual, pleasant. I raised my glass slightly. "Meeting got canceled. Thought I'd surprise you." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, just a tiny, imperceptible moment of hesitation. But I caught it. A lesser man would have missed it. She glanced at the table, saw the takeout bag, the second wine glass I had poured, and something in her relaxed, just a little. She thought she was safe. She had no idea. I watched her move, the way she avoided looking at the couch, the way she hesitated before kissing me on the cheek. A performance. Sloppy, amateurish. She had grown careless, comfortable in the belief that I was the devoted, clueless husband who would never see the signs. But I saw everything now. And the best part? She had no idea that, in that very moment, I was already planning her downfall. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to accuse her. That would be too easy. Too predictable. No, I was going to make her doubt. Make her wonder. Make her paranoid. She had introduced another man into our home. I was going to introduce another woman into her mind. Over the next few weeks, I would plant the seeds. A lipstick stain that wasn't hers. A perfume she didn't own. A long strand of blonde hair in the passenger seat of my car, when she knew damn well I didn't know any blondes. I would watch her try to keep her secret while slowly unraveling over mine. And the best part? There would be no other woman. Not really. Just a ghost. A phantom. A perfect illusion. She had betrayed me. Now, it was my turn. Looking back, it almost feels like I was living in a dream. A well-constructed, beautifully designed illusion where everything made sense, until it didn't. My life with Sophie wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable, predictable, solid. The kind of life most men would kill for. Mornings started the same way every day. The smell of fresh coffee drifting through the kitchen, the soft hum of the news playing in the background, and Sophie sitting at the counter in one of my oversized t-shirts, scrolling through her phone as I made breakfast. It was our routine. I liked routines. They gave me a sense of control, of stability. She always claimed she was too busy to cook, so I handled breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Simple, efficient. She would take lazy sips of her drink, watching me with that familiar, amused expression, like she had cracked some inside joke I wasn't in on. I used to love that look. We would talk about nothing and everything. Work, plans for the weekend, which of our friends was doing something ridiculous. She would laugh at my stupid comments, roll her eyes when I corrected her pronunciation of some fancy wine she mispronounced, and then kiss me quickly before rushing off to get ready. A normal, happy couple. At least, that's what I thought. Evenings were just as predictable. I'd get home, and she'd be there, sometimes cooking, sometimes curled up on the couch with a book. She had this habit of reading half a novel, getting bored, and abandoning it for a new one. Our shelves were filled with half-finished stories, just like us, apparently. We would eat together, watch something light on TV, then head to bed. I always fell asleep first. She was a night owl, always claiming she needed just one more episode or just a few more pages. I never questioned it. Why would I? That's the thing about trust. You don't analyze it when it's still intact. I never checked her phone, never questioned her late nights out with her friends, never even noticed when she started dressing a little nicer, spending more time on her hair before heading out. The signs were there, but I wasn't looking. I remember this one time, about 2 months ago, when I found a receipt in the pocket of her jeans while doing laundry. A fancy restaurant. A Tuesday night. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. I asked her about it casually, not because I suspected anything, but because I had genuinely thought she was at a work event that night. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, yeah," she had said, pulling her hair into a loose bun. I met up with Lisa after work. She was having a rough week, so I took her out. "I forgot to tell you, sorry." I nodded, accepting it without a second thought. Lisa was her best friend. It made sense. Except later that week, when I ran into Lisa at a party, I mentioned it, just in passing, and she blinked at me, confused. "Oh, yeah, that night. Right. Yeah, it was fun." But there was something in her voice, the way her eyes darted away for half a second too long. It bothered me, but not enough. Then there were the text messages she started getting late at night. Nothing overtly suspicious, just vibrations in the dark, followed by her rolling over, phone held close to her chest as she read them. "You okay?" I asked once, half asleep. "Yeah," she whispered. "Just work stuff." And I believed her. Because I was a fool. It's funny how, when you're in the moment, you can rationalize anything. "Oh, she's just more distant because work is stressful." "Oh, she's been spending more time out because she needs space." "Oh, she's dressing up more because she finally decided to take my advice and treat herself." I was making excuses for a woman who had already left me. I just didn't know it yet. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every betrayal starts long before the final blow. It starts in the little things, the slight shifts, the minor inconsistencies. The stories that don't quite add up but seem harmless at the time. The way she suddenly starts complimenting you more, as if overcompensating for the guilt she won't acknowledge. There was one night that should have been a red flag. We were out with friends, and someone jokingly asked me, "If Sophie ever cheated on you, would you even notice?" Everyone laughed. It was just a joke. But Sophie? She laughed a little too hard. A little too long. And I ignored it. Because I was the kind of man who didn't believe that his wife would ever do something like that. Because I was the kind of man who thought love meant certainty. Because I was blind. But not anymore. Now, when I look back at that life, our cozy kitchen, our quiet dinners, our lazy Sundays in bed, it doesn't feel real. It feels like a set, a carefully staged performance where I was the only one who didn't know the script. I thought I had a partner. Turns out, I had an actress. And now, the show was over. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly suspect, was that I wasn't about to walk off stage quietly. No, I was going to rewrite the ending. And this time, she wouldn't see it coming. It started with something small. Something so insignificant that, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, and now I see it for what it was, the first crack in the illusion. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those lazy weekends where the most ambitious thing I had planned was grilling steaks and watching the game. Sophie had been acting normal all morning, or at least what I thought was normal at the time. She was on her phone more than usual, but that wasn't unusual in itself. She was always glued to social media, texting Lisa, or scrolling through Pinterest for home decor inspiration that we both knew she'd never actually buy. But then came the moment, the one I keep replaying in my head. I was in the kitchen, marinating the steaks, when her phone, which was sitting on the counter, lit up with a text. Nothing strange about that, but it was the way she reacted that set something off inside me. She was across the room, but But the second she saw the screen light up, her entire body tensed. Not just startled, panicked, like someone had fired a gunshot in a silent room. Before I could even register what was happening, she was on me, snatching the phone off the counter so fast it nearly slipped from her hands. "Who was that?" I asked casually, not even thinking much of it at first. "Lisa," she said too quickly. I raised an eyebrow, still wiping marinade off my hands. "Yeah? What's she up to?" Sophie hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But it was there. "Oh, nothing. Just sending me some outfit ideas for next weekend." It was an answer that should have made sense. That would have made sense, except for one thing. Lisa had texted her less than 5 minutes ago. I had just watched Sophie laugh at whatever Lisa had sent, phone in hand, totally relaxed. If that was the same conversation, why the reaction now? Something wasn't right. I glanced at her phone in her grip, the screen now dark. If it was just Lisa, why had she grabbed it like that? Why the nervous energy, the forced nonchalance? A slow, creeping sensation settled into my gut. I knew Sophie. I had spent years learning every little detail about her, every habit, every instinctive movement. And what I saw in that moment was not normal. Still, I didn't press. Not yet. I filed it away, like a detective taking mental notes at a crime scene, and watched. And once I started watching, I saw everything. The next day, she got a call while we were out shopping. I was holding the bags, waiting for her to finish debating between 2 overpriced candles, when her phone rang. Again, nothing unusual, except for the way she immediately turned away from me. It was subtle, but deliberate. She picked up, lowering her voice, walking a few steps away as if she needed space to hear. But I wasn't deaf. I could still hear the soft, careful tone of her voice. Not flirtatious, not obvious, but controlled, like someone who didn't want to be overheard. "Yeah. No, I can't right now. I told you, I'll text later." "No, it's fine, just okay." "Okay, bye." She hung up and turned back to me, her expression perfectly neutral. Almost too neutral. "Who was that?" I asked, again, keeping my voice even. "Lisa. Lisa." Again. That was twice in 2 days she had used her best friend's name as an excuse. I didn't let my face betray anything, just nodded. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. She's just being dramatic about something. You know how she is." She flashed me a smile and grabbed my arm, steering me toward the checkout like the conversation had already been forgotten. But I didn't forget. That night, I sent Lisa a text. "Hey, tell Sophie I hope everything's okay. She mentioned you were going through something today." The reply came fast. "Huh? What do you mean?" "She said you called earlier." Sounded stressed. "I haven't called her all day." "Everything good." I stared at my screen for a long time, something cold and ugly twisting in my stomach. Lisa hadn't called. She hadn't sent a text. Sophie had lied. Blatantly. I sat there, phone still in my hand, replaying every little moment from the past few weeks. The late nights. The sudden change in how often she left the house. The small, seemingly meaningless lies that I had brushed off as nothing. Individually, they were just minor red flags. But together? Together, they were a pattern. I didn't say anything that night. I climbed into bed beside her, wrapped an arm around her waist like I always did, and let her drift off to sleep, completely unaware that her game had already started to fall apart. Lies were like cracks in glass. They could hold for a while, but sooner or later, they shattered. I had always believed that the truth had a way of revealing itself, but I wasn't about to sit around and wait for it to knock on my door. No, if Sophie was hiding something, and by now, I knew she was, I was going to drag the truth into the light myself. After Lisa's accidental alibi destruction, I stopped pretending. I stopped making excuses for her, stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. Instead, I started watching, studying, playing along. Because that was the key, wasn't it? She thought she was in control of the lie. She thought she was smarter than me, that I was the blind, trusting husband who would never suspect a thing. She had no idea I had already started dismantling her story piece by piece. The first thing I noticed was her phone behavior. Sophie had always been comfortable around me with her phone, leaving it on the table, unlocked, texting in front of me without a second thought. But now? Now it was practically glued to her hand. She took it with her everywhere, even places she never used to before, the bathroom, the laundry room, even when she was just grabbing something from the car. And the notifications? They were different. Before, when Lisa or her coworkers texted, she'd read the messages openly, sometimes even showing me funny ones. Now, when her phone buzzed, her entire posture changed. She'd angle the screen away, casually lock it before I could glance over, and if I was too close, she wouldn't check it at all. She'd let it sit there, vibrating, pretending it was nothing, but her eyes would betray her. One night, as we sat on the couch, her phone lit up with a message. Just a name. Daniel. I felt the first true rush of adrenaline, but I kept my face neutral. You gonna get that? I asked, nodding toward the phone. She hesitated for half a second. Oh, it's just a work thing. Nothing important. She grabbed the phone and flipped it over, screen down. Not the natural, thoughtless motion of someone who didn't care, but the deliberate action of someone hiding something. I smiled to myself. The game had officially begun. I wasn't stupid enough to go for her phone outright. She had changed her password. I had noticed a week ago when she suddenly started tilting the screen away when unlocking it. She used to have a simple code, her birthday, a detail I never questioned because she had nothing to hide. Now, she had something to protect. So I went for something easier. Sophie wasn't particularly tech-savvy, and most people were creatures of habit. If she had changed her phone password, she had likely changed her other passwords too, but not all of them. So I tested a theory. I opened her laptop one evening, the one she used for work, and typed in her old password. Access denied. Interesting. I tried a variation, adding the year of our wedding at the end. Access granted. She had changed her security, but not enough. Inside, there wasn't much, just work files, emails, and documents. But I wasn't looking for files. I was looking for patterns. Her browser history was wiped. That was new. Sophie had never cared about clearing history before. Suspicious. But what she didn't know was that some traces always remain. I checked the cached files, the autofill logins. And that's when I saw it, an email address I didn't recognize. Not her work email. Not her personal email. A third account. She had created a separate email. I didn't have the password, but I didn't need it. The fact that it existed was enough. I started testing her, throwing small traps into conversation, asking about places she had been. One night, she told me she had gone out for coffee with Lisa. So I texted Lisa the next morning. How was coffee with Sophie? Lisa's reply was almost immediate. Oh, we didn't end up going. She had to cancel. Hope everything's okay. So she was lying about where she was. Now, it was about who she was with. I needed to push her, just a little. To make her feel the tiniest sliver of doubt, the first creeping sense that something wasn't quite right. So one night, as we lay in bed, I let out a casual sigh and said, You know, it's funny. I ran into Lisa today at the store. She said she hasn't seen you in a while. Sophie tensed. Barely, but I felt it. She turned over, giving me a sleepy smile. Oh, well, maybe she forgot. We were together just the other day. I hummed. Let the silence stretch. Then, after a pause, I chuckled and said, Yeah, weird. She was sure she hadn't. I saw it then, the flicker of panic in her eyes. She didn't say anything else. Just turned off the bedside lamp and faced away from me. I lay there in the dark, smiling to myself. She thought she was keeping a secret. She had no idea that, piece by piece, I was already tearing it apart. I had prepared myself for this moment. I had run through every possible scenario in my head, calculated every move, steeled myself against the inevitable. And yet, when the truth finally came crashing down, it still hit like a bullet to the chest. It happened on a Friday night. Sophie was supposed to be out with the girls, another flimsy excuse I had already confirmed as a lie. Lisa had unknowingly exposed her once again when I casually asked what they were up to, only to get a confused, "Oh, I think she had other plans tonight," in response. That was all the confirmation I needed. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for more half-baked excuses. I was done playing passive. It was time to go hunting. The first step was simple. I called her. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat there, phone in hand, heartbeat steady, a cold sense of certainty settling into my bones. There was only one reason she wouldn't pick up. She wasn't alone. So I tracked her. Sophie had never been particularly cautious about technology, and she had no idea that I had set up location sharing on her phone months ago when we were planning a trip together. She had never turned it off. She probably didn't even remember it existed. But I did. Her pin was blinking on the screen, clear as day. Not at Lisa's house. Not at a restaurant. A hotel. A hotel. For a moment, I just stared at it, the undeniable proof staring back at me. And then, something inside me clicked. The pain was there, yes. The sense of betrayal, the white-hot rage. But above all else, there was a single, unwavering thought. She thinks she's untouchable. She thinks she's won. I got in my car and drove. It was almost laughable how easy it was. The hotel wasn't even far. Just a few miles from our house, a quiet, discreet little place that practically screamed infidelity. I parked across the street, watching the entrance, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes later, she walked out. Sophie, my wife. And she wasn't alone. The man beside her was younger than me. Maybe early 30s, fit, well-dressed in that try-hard way men who think too highly of themselves tend to be. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward his car like he owned her. And Sophie, my Sophie, laughed at something he said, touching his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she hadn't just burned our entire life to the ground. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. There it was. The truth. No more suspicions. No more doubts. Just cold, undeniable reality. And yet, I didn't move. I didn't explode out of the car, didn't storm across the street, didn't start a scene. Because what was the point? A confrontation wouldn't fix this. Wouldn't make her regret it. If anything, she'd just cry, spin some pathetic excuse, gaslight me into thinking it was somehow my fault. No, that wasn't how this was going to go. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about revenge. So I sat there, watching as they got into his car, watching as they drove off into the night. And as they disappeared down the road, I leaned back in my seat, exhaled slowly, and started planning. If she wanted to play games, I would show her what real strategy looked like. She had no idea that she had just handed me all the power. Sitting in my car that night, watching Sophie disappear into the darkness with him, I felt nothing. Not sorrow, not heartbreak, not even anger. Just a cold, calculated clarity. She thought she had won. Thought she had outmaneuvered me, deceived me so thoroughly that I would never see through her lies. But she had underestimated me, and that was going to be her undoing. Revenge wasn't about rage. It wasn't about screaming in her face or exposing her in a dramatic, emotional outburst. That was what weak men did. No, my revenge had to be precise. Surgical. It had to strike her in the one place she never expected, the place that would hurt her the most. So I started analyzing. Sophie wasn't just cheating, she was leading a double life. That much was clear. The hotel, the secrecy, the separate email account. This wasn't some drunken mistake or meaningless fling. This was an affair with structure. With planning. That meant she had something to lose. And that's what I needed to take from her. I went home that night and did what I always did when faced with a challenge. I researched. Every move she had made in the last few months replayed in my mind. Every lie she had told, every change in her routine. I dissected it all, looking for the weak points. And then I found it. Her career. Sophie had spent years building her reputation. She was a consultant for high-end clients, helping businesses refine their branding and public image. She thrived on appearances, on her network, on the relationships she had carefully cultivated over the years. Everything she had was built on trust, perception, and influence. If that trust was broken, if her image was tainted, it would all crumble. And I had the perfect way to do it. Step 1 was simple: gather evidence. I wasn't going to be reckless. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof that she couldn't talk her way out of. I started by accessing her hidden email account. She had used a variation of her usual password for her laptop, which meant there was a chance she had done the same for this account. It took a few tries, but eventually, I cracked it. And what I found inside was even worse than I expected. Emails. Dozens of them. Some just flirtatious, some explicit. Conversations detailing how and when they would meet, their inside jokes, their complaints about me. But one message stood out above the rest. A business email from one of her top clients, a major company that relied on her for public relations. And Sophie, in her arrogance, had been emailing her lover from the same device she used for work. It was almost too easy. Step 2. The setup. I spent the next week laying the groundwork. I didn't change a thing in my behavior. I still kissed her goodnight, still made her coffee in the morning, still asked about her day as if nothing had changed. And she continued her charade, oblivious. I even pretended to be busier than usual, claiming I had extra projects at work. It gave her the false sense of security she needed to keep making mistakes. While she was out with her friends, I was working. I set up anonymous email accounts, carefully compiling everything I had gathered, screenshots, messages, photos. I didn't just want to expose her affair. I wanted to destroy her credibility. I created a detailed, professional-looking document outlining her unethical business practices, attaching her personal messages sent from company accounts as evidence. Step 3. Timing. It wasn't enough to drop the bomb. It had to be detonated at the perfect moment. And what better moment than at her own celebration? Sophie had an upcoming event, an industry gathering, filled with executives, clients, and colleagues. She had been talking about it for weeks, bragging about the new contract she was about to sign, how this would be a turning point in her career. That's when I would strike. The day of the event, I watched her get ready, dressed in her best, standing in front of the mirror with that perfectly curated smile, completely unaware that within hours, her world would be in flames. I arrived separately, of course. She thought I was coming late because of work. In reality, I was already there, watching. And then, with a few clicks, I released everything. Anonymous emails to key figures in the room. A single message to the CEO of the company she was about to sign with. The moment her phone buzzed with the first notification, I saw it. The way her face froze, the way she stiffened, fingers trembling as she read. One by one, people around the room started checking their phones, whispering, looking at her. Panic spread across her face. She tried to smile, tried to brush it off, but I saw the exact moment she realized it was over. And then, as she turned, desperate to find me, I stepped forward. Drink in hand, I met her eyes, and I smiled. Because this was only the beginning. The moment her phone buzzed, I saw the crack. It was subtle at first, a small flicker of confusion as she glanced at the screen, expecting just another congratulatory message or routine email. But then, the confusion hardened into something else. A sharp inhale, a twitch in her jaw. She blinked once, twice, and suddenly, she was somewhere else entirely. Not in this glamorous, candlelit venue, not surrounded by high-profile executives and influential colleagues, but alone in her own unraveling reality. And then, the whispers started. I watched her as she swallowed, hands trembling slightly as she scrolled, clicking open email after email, each one worse than the last. Every single dirty secret, every explicit exchange, every unethical action, all laid bare, sitting in the inboxes of people who mattered. Not just her employers, her clients. Sophie had always been a master of control. She built her entire persona on composure, on calculated poise. Even now, as the walls closed in around her, she tried to keep it together, raising her head, smoothing down the fabric of her expensive dress, as if she could press reality back into place. But she couldn't. Not this time. A few feet away, I saw a man, tall, lean, well-dressed, pull out his phone, frown, then look up at her. Recognition. Then another. And another. It was like watching dominoes fall, except she was the only one still trying to stand. I took a slow sip of my drink, enjoying the way her mask cracked at the edges. She turned, scanning the room, searching. For me, it was only fair. I had always been the one to fix things for her. The steady husband, the reliable presence in her life. She had leaned on me for years, never realizing that I was the one holding everything up. Now, I was the one who had kicked the foundation out from under her, and she was finally feeling the freefall. She spotted me, and in that instant, she knew. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Fear. Not of exposure, not of humiliation, but of me. She started toward me, her heels clicking too fast against the marble floor, like she was trying to outrun the inevitable. But I had already set everything in motion. There was no stopping it now. As she reached me, I saw it, the moment the weight of it all crushed her. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes wide, pleading. "H, what did you do?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the soft hum of the live jazz band still playing in the background. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to think. "Oh, you mean the emails?" I let out a small chuckle. "Funny thing, actually. Someone sent them to all the wrong people. Tragic, really." Her eyes darted around the room again. People were staring now. Some openly, others pretending not to. A few had already begun to distance themselves from her, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Her client, the one she had spent months trying to lock down, the one whose contract was supposed to secure her next big promotion, was shaking his head, speaking in hushed tones to another executive. The deal was gone. Her career was crumbling before her eyes. And I wasn't done yet. I leaned in slightly, just enough so she could hear me over the murmurs of the crowd. You should probably check your personal bank account, too. Her breath hitched. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but I saw the fear spike behind her eyes. She didn't know. Not yet. I had spent weeks preparing for this. Moving money out of reach, shifting assets, freezing accounts in my name, redirecting automatic transfers. Sophie had never been good with finances. That had always been my domain. She trusted me to handle everything, and she should have been more careful about that. Her fingers fumbled as she pulled out her phone, unlocking it with shaky hands. I watched her shoulders tense as she opened her banking app, staring at the numbers that didn't make sense. No more joint savings. No emergency fund. She had nothing left. She turned to me then, panic giving way to pure desperation. You? Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, lowering her voice as she stepped closer. You can't do this to me. I smiled. I didn't do anything, Sophie. You did. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, no, not yet. Just raw, unfiltered realization. You don't understand, she whispered. This is my career. This is my life. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. And you were my wife. Her lips trembled. I made a mistake. I let out a quiet chuckle. No, Sophie. You made a choice. And then, I stepped back, watching as her entire illusion of control shattered. Her world had always been built on lies, manipulation, and perception. She had played the game for so long, convinced that she would never be caught, never be outplayed. But she had forgotten something crucial. I had been watching. I had been waiting. And tonight? Tonight, she finally lost. Sophie stood there, frozen, her fingers still clutching her phone as if the screen would change, as if the numbers in her bank account would magically revert to what they were before. But they wouldn't. Just like her career wouldn't be salvaged, just like her reputation wouldn't recover. This was real, and she knew it. The whispers had turned into murmurs, the murmurs into quiet but unmistakable judgment. People were looking at her now, really looking at her. Some with curiosity, some with disappointment, others with that specific kind of amusement that comes when watching someone who once held power lose it all in real time. The executives, her colleagues, her clients, they had all received the same email, read the same messages, seen her lies laid bare. And now, they were distancing themselves. She was already untouchable. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She took a small step toward me, voice trembling. Please. Just one word. No defenses, no excuses, no bravado, just raw, quiet pleading. I let her stand there, drowning in the weight of her own choices. I had imagined this moment so many times, had envisioned 1,000 different reactions she might have, anger, denial, defiance. But this was something else entirely. She wasn't just losing. She was unraveling. Sophie. The voice belonged to Daniel, the man she had thrown everything away for. He had been lingering in the background, watching everything unfold. But now, with the air so thick with tension, he finally stepped forward. He wasn't as composed as he had been earlier in the night. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting between me and Sophie, realization dawning. You, his voice was low, hesitant. What's going on? Sophie spun to him so quickly that I could practically see the desperation seeping through her pores. It's nothing, she rushed out, shaking her head. It's just, someone is trying to ruin me. It's all lies. Lies. I echoed, tilting my head slightly. Which part, exactly? I let the silence stretch between us. The part where you used company emails to organize hotel meetups? The part where you falsified invoices to cover up business trips that never happened? Or the part where you used my name to secure a personal loan? That last one landed like a physical blow. Daniel visibly tensed. Wait, what? Sophie turned back to me, face crumbling. She swallowed hard. I needed time to figure things out. I was going to tell you. Tell me. I interrupted smoothly. Before or after you drained the last of our savings? Before or after you planned to move on and leave me with the financial wreckage? She shook her head frantically. I never meant for. Her voice broke. Her chest rose and fell in panicked breaths, her carefully curated mask finally, completely shattered. I could see it now. The desperation creeping into her bones, the sheer helplessness that she had never experienced before. Sophie had always been the one in control, always the one dictating the terms. But now? Now she was the one grasping for solid ground. Daniel took a slow step back. His expression had shifted from concern to realization, and finally to something icy. You told me you were getting divorced. His voice was quieter now, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. That you and your husband were just going through the motions. Sophie turned to him, eyes wide, frantic. We were. She tripped over her own words, her mind scrambling for a way out, a new angle, a new version of reality that might still save her. But there wasn't one. Daniel exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Unbelievable. And then, in front of everyone, he walked away. I didn't even have to say anything. The moment she lost him, she lost everything. A faint choking sound escaped her lips, as if she had been punched in the gut. Her entire body sagged, her legs unsteady. This was it. The moment she realized she had nothing left. No money, no career, no backup plan, and certainly no one left to manipulate. She turned back to me now, voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. You did this to me. I smiled. Not out of joy, not out of malice, but out of sheer, cold satisfaction. No, Sophie, I said, watching as the final thread of control slipped from her grasp. You did this to yourself. Her lips trembled. I made a mistake. I let her words hang between us for a moment, savoring the weight of them. And then, with deliberate precision, I spoke the last words I would ever say to her. You made your choice. And then, I turned my back on her and walked away. In the days that followed, Sophie's world collapsed piece by piece, each fracture more devastating than the last. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to lift a single finger after that night. The destruction was already in motion. The emails had done their job. Her professional reputation was ruined. Clients pulled out of deals. Business partners refused to return her calls. The company she had worked so hard to impress severed ties immediately, citing ethics violations as the official reason. Unofficially, she was now radioactive. No one wanted to be associated with a woman who had publicly humiliated herself and dragged her personal mess into professional circles. She tried to recover, of course. I watched from a distance as she scrambled to salvage what she could, desperate to regain control. She tried calling in favors. The same people who used to praise her, invite her to exclusive events, stroke her ego, they suddenly weren't answering her calls. That's the thing about social status. It's fragile. The moment people sense you're no longer useful to them, they disappear. Then came the financial fallout. She had nothing. The savings she thought she had? Gone. The credit cards she relied on? Frozen. She couldn't even access the accounts she had secretly opened because they were tied to assets that no longer existed. She was drowning, and every time she tried to come up for air, another wave crashed over her. Then came the personal reckoning. Her family found out. I didn't have to tell them. They found out the same way everyone else did, through whispers, through texts, through people asking too many questions. Her mother called me one evening, voice heavy with shame and disappointment. She apologized. Apologized. For the way Sophie had treated me. Said she had raised her better than this. That she didn't know what had happened to her daughter. I listened, said all the right things, reassured her that she didn't have to take responsibility for Sophie's choices. But deep down, I knew the truth. Sophie had always been this person. She had just been good at hiding it. Her brother, one of my closest friends before all this, cut ties with her completely. He texted me, short and to the point, I don't have a sister anymore. That was the part one think broke her the most. Losing her family. Because for all her arrogance, for all her selfishness, Sophie thrived on admiration. She needed people to see her as successful, as desirable, as the woman who had it all. But now? Now she was a cautionary tale. A joke whispered behind closed doors. Daniel? Gone. He didn't just leave that night, he ghosted her completely. Blocked her number, ignored her attempts to reach out, disappeared without a trace. She had destroyed her life for a man who never even cared enough to look back. And me? I thrived. I had already moved on before she even realized she had lost. The house? Mine. The assets? Mine. The life she thought she could manipulate and walk away from? I took it all. And the best part? I didn't have to fight her for anything. Because by the time she even tried to push back, she had no ground left to stand on. The last time I saw her was in a coffee shop, months later. She looked different. Not in a drastic way, not like she had fallen into complete ruin, but in a way that was unmistakable. Tired, older, beaten. She wasn't the woman she used to be, not the confident, composed professional who used to glide into a room like she owned it. She saw me before I saw her. I was with someone, a woman who was everything Sophie had once pretended to be. Beautiful, kind, confident without arrogance. Real. And when Sophie's eyes met mine, I saw it. Regret. Not because she loved me. She never really did. She regretted losing what I had given her. The security, the respect, the life. She started toward me, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned back to the woman across from me, smiled, and continued my conversation like she had never even existed. Because in my world, she didn't. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back, without acknowledging her existence, without giving her the satisfaction of a final conversation. Because she didn't deserve one. There was a time when I might have wondered what she was thinking in that moment, whether she felt regret, whether she wished she could take it all back. But now I knew the answer didn't matter. She had already lost, and I had already won. Winning didn't mean getting revenge in some dramatic, theatrical way. It wasn't about yelling, about destroying her in a single explosive moment. Winning was walking away while she had to live with the consequences. Winning was watching her world crumble without ever lifting a finger to help. Winning was knowing that the woman who thought she could have everything, her career, her affair, her perfect social standing, was now left with nothing. And the best part? I was better off than ever. I had rebuilt. No, I had upgraded. She was supposed to be irreplaceable, wasn't she? That's what she had always believed. That's what people like her always think. That they are the exception, the one person who will always be wanted, always be desired, always be in control. But she wasn't. She was disposable, forgettable. The woman sitting across from me that day, the one who laughed at my jokes, who looked at me like I was a man worth knowing, worth respecting, she wasn't a replacement. She was an improvement. And I could see it in Sophie's face as she watched us from across the room. She knew it too. And that's the thing about people like Sophie. They don't just hate losing. They hate being replaced. They hate knowing that the person they betrayed moved on without them. That they were just a chapter in someone else's story instead of the whole book. I wonder if she still thinks about that moment. If she still wonders what would have happened if she had chosen differently. If she realizes that there was no going back. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted to punish her, but because she simply wasn't worth it. But here's the real question. If you were in my position, would you have done the same? Or would you have made her suffer even more? Bye-bye.